pay raise isn't rocket science, especially when Canadians overwhelmingly oppose it. The feds stopped MP pay raises between 2010 and 2013 in response to the 08-09 recession. BC recently froze pay for MLAs. Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston recalled the legislature, froze MLA pay, and then cut his own pay by $11,000. Here in Ottawa, backbench MPs currently collect a $189,500 salary. Trudeau collects a $379,000 salary from taxpayers. MPs don't deserve another raise, and MPs don't need another raise from their constituents who are struggling to fill the fridge. MPs especially don't deserve a raise when they make life unaffordable with tax hikes.
Hey, welcome back. Today was Budget Day in Canada. That's the day where Justin Trudeau announces what taxes he's going to take from your pocket and who the lucky winners of the Liberal lottery are for his spending spree. There's not a lot of pundits I trust on this issue because so many are compromised. They receive some of that Liberal lotto money. I'm referring, of course, to every journalist in this country who is on the dole from Trudeau's media bailout. But one person I trust inherently is one of the great leaders of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation because, as you know, they do not take a dime from government. So a man who was in the lockup today, that is, he spent hours poring over the budget before it was formally released, is our friend Franco Terrazzano, who joins us live from Ottawa today. Franco, great to see you again. You were in the lockup. That means you had a chance to really meticulously go through this large document. Can you sum it up for us? How is the budget, or rather, how bad is it?
Oh, it's bad. You know, I was in the budget lockup from about 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Still didn't find any savings. Couldn't find any savings in there, Ezra, even though Freeland is running around talking about fiscal prudence this, fiscal prudence that. You'll be quite surprised to know that there isn't any fiscal prudence. In fact, I'll say this on the record. This budget shows that the government doesn't care about fiscal prudence or helping taxpayers. Okay, the government's been talking about finding savings. Well, get this. They spent $18 billion over their own budget in 2022, and now they want to spend an extra $20 billion in 2023. So if they think that's savings, newsflash, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. You know, I'm pretty sure I know the answer before I ask it. Is the total amount of money extracted from Canadians in the form of taxes, is it, as I think it is, at its record high? I mean, I can't imagine that taxes have fallen. Is the amount of money taken from Canadians a new record?
Ezra, spending was at an all-time high before the pandemic. Before the pandemic, the government was spending more money in 2018 than the feds did during any single year during World War II. And now the government is continuing its spending spree. We're seeing deficits as far as the eye can see. This year, in 2023, the deficit will be $40 billion, about $10 billion more than the last fiscal update. But, you know, I think that taxpayers have every reason to believe that this government will never balance the budget. Yeah. Remember, Trudeau said the budget will balance itself. Yeah. Well, still waiting for that. I don't have a watch on, but you get the point. Back in 2015, Trudeau said that they would run a few modest deficits, balance the books by 2019. They missed that by $20 billion, even before the pandemic. And now the government isn't even pretending that it's going to balance the budget.
Well, you know, he says budget, you just fix the economy from the heart out. I think that was another one of his famous quotes. You know, budget is a noun. Can I see your budget? What does the budget say? But budget is also a verb, which is typically used, for example, by households. We have to budget. We have to budget ourselves more carefully, especially as Canada. I'm not sure if we're technically in a recession right now, but certainly inflation means that we have to all budget a little bit better. The fact that the government isn't budgeting, that it's spending the greatest amount ever in history, tells me that they think that their choices are more important than individual Canadian families' choices, that they are a better recipient of money than the taxpayers themselves. If a government won't tighten its own belt as we head into tough times, that's its way of saying you, lowly workers, should tighten your belts, businesses, entrepreneurs. And the fact that they're giving themselves a raise on April 1st, while jacking up the carbon tax on April 1st, I don't know. I know April 1st is April Fool's Day, but joke's on us, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. You pay higher taxes, they take higher pay. I was about to cut you off there for a second and be like, hey, we don't all have to tighten our belts. If you're working within the golden gates of government, you don't have to tighten your belt, right? More than 300,000 federal government bureaucrats received at least one raise when their neighbors in the private sector lost a job, took a pay cut, and maybe even lost their business during the pandemic. Now they're all pushing for huge raises again. But remember, our members of parliament, April 1, taking their fourth pay raise since the beginning of the pandemic, an extra 5,100 smackers for a backbencher, all the way up to an extra $10,200 for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. So when Freeland says that she's going to be making life more affordable, make life more affordable for who? Yeah. But the second thing, and to your main point, is look, this government couldn't balance the budget of a lemonade stand, now wants to run around and pretend to be investment banker with taxpayers' money. Yeah. They have this Canada Growth Fund. It's a corporate slush fund. It's going to be $15 billion of taxpayers' money going into this thing. It just smells like corporate welfare to me, plain and simple, Ezra.
Yeah. Well, they do all sorts of weird things. And one of the things they do that has always irked me is the amount of Canadian money that they shower on their foreign friends. And I remember in the early days when Trudeau was trying to get voted onto the United Nations Security Council, it was so clear. It was just constant bribery. He would go on these junkets and just shower cash on every country, especially dictatorships, because really it was one country, one vote in the General Assembly. Well, Canada lost that vote and he still added. I mean, in the past, it was the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, basically Canadian taxpayers who were supposed to build airports and pipelines in China. A day doesn't go by where I don't see him announcing another grant to Haiti or Ukraine. And whether or not you support those countries emotionally, I'm not sure if it makes sense for us just to wring out maximum dough from Canada and spend it in other places. How's the foreign aid looking? Did you look at that line item?
I didn't see that, but let's not forget who they're also showering money on, themselves.
Yeah.
Right. Every time they go overseas, nearly six figures on a fancy airplane food, beef Wellington, beef carpaccio, stuffed pork tenderloin. And then they have the audacity to look Canadians in the eye and say, oh, just like normal airline food that you guys have. Yeah. Well, I don't know about you. I've been on Air Canada. I've been on WestJet. We didn't get no beef Wellington.
Yeah.
Like, are you serious?
Yeah. And some of those, like some of them were over $1,000 per person for meals. I don't know how you even do that. Like, do you have a personal chef for everyone there? It's so tone deaf. But I think, they say a fish rots from the head down. I remember the Harper years, and the man had his flaws, but he led by example in terms of, not having a showy, over-the-top lifestyle. I remember there were sometimes he would take a foreign trip. He wouldn't even stay over in the country in question. He would come home so he wouldn't incur hotel fees. Now, Trudeau released on Friday afternoon that he, in fact, was the $6,000 a night hotel guy. Well, we all knew that, but he, for some reason, was avoiding it. It's hard to believe there was a time in Canada when Harper was PM where a cabinet minister having a $16 orange juice was the pretext for her being sacked from cabinet. I think every single Liberal looks at how the boss operates and says, oh, that's the role model. I'll govern myself accordingly. I really think it's example set by the top guy.
And the bureaucracy,
yeah,
right? We have a $40 billion deficit. Why? Well, I mean, when members of parliament stuff themselves with pay raise after pay raise after pay raise after pay raise, well, how are they going to sell savings in the department?
Yeah.
No, the department bureaucrats are going to want huge raises. And that's exactly what's going on right now. And that's why we're seeing costs go through the roof.
Yeah.
But look, let's go back to that $6,000 per night hotel room. Yeah, I mean, surprise, surprise, it was Trudeau. He didn't need to be Sherlock Holmes to figure that one out. But let's not forget, he released and he finally told taxpayer the truth as President Biden was coming to town because he wanted to bury the story. He knew the information was going to get out because the Canadian Taxpayers Federation launched a legal challenge to force the government to come clean. They knew that their legal arguments were bogus. They knew that they were going to lose in court. So Trudeau finally tells the truth to taxpayers. And he tries to bury the story the evening that President Biden comes to town because he hopes that there's too much going on in the news and he won't be held accountable.
That was an excerpt from the Ezra Levant show. I'm Ezra Levant. Every weekday, I do a monologue about the topic of the day. Then I interview a fascinating guest either in studio or via Skype. And then I read your mail, whether it's fan mail or hate mail, which is sometimes even more interesting. This is on our premium service, though, called Rebel News Plus. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. It's $8 a month or less if you buy a whole year in advance. You get my show every weeknight, plus Sheila Gunn Reid's show every week. It's called The Gun Show. It's pretty amazing. You know, we rely on you because we do not take a dime from the government. In Canada, that makes us almost unique. So please help us out and help yourself to some great journalism at rebelnewsplus.com.